Good morning to one and all. I am Dr. Subhasree, Assistant Professor in Department of History, Sri Sharda College for Women, Autonomous, Salem 16. Today we are going to see the topic Renaissance. Let us see the topic. Renaissance. Introduction. Western Roman Empire in 5th century CE, the center of Greek and Roman learning, shifted to the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, on the contrary, Western Europe suffered from the lack of scientific and cultural advancement. With the capture of Constantinople in 1453 by the Ottoman Turks, the Byzantine Greek scholars were compelled to migrate to Rome. Thus, Rome witnessed revival of the Greek and Roman heritage, which brought spirit of inquiry in forefront, thereby stimulating the progress of science, art, architecture, and sculpture, literature, painting, geography, and religion. Further, the emergence of city-states like Florence and Venice served as the patronage center of the refugee Byzantine Greek scholars. This paved the way for Renaissance. So, the term Renaissance literally means rebirth or revival. In historical context, it refers to the significant changes that took place in Europe during the transition period between the medieval and modern. There was a revival of literature and art on the intellectual side based on Greco-Roman knowledge. The spirit of individualism and humanism began to dominate in the social sphere. The religious transformation was symbolized by the Reformation. The Renaissance was mainly a consequence of the decline of feudalism and is largely marked by the three features: the emergence of humanism, the beginning of modern Renaissance, enlightenment, and industrial revolution. The most important among them was the emergence of spirit of humanism, which was in fact the trigger for the other features and also for numerous other developments. Humanism. By the 14th century, humanism gained momentum in Italy, which professed the idea that man was the center of his own universe and people should embrace human achievements in education, classical arts, literature, and science. Further, in 1450, the invention of the printing press by John Gutenberg allowed for improved communication throughout Europe and for ideas to spread more quickly. Bible was the first book published by Gutenberg. Also, many scholars believe that mercantilism had a strong influence and impacted culture in Europe and set the stage for the Renaissance. Spirit of humanism. The spirit of humanism basically meant a decisive shift in concern for human as distinct from divine matters. Humanism as a system of views eulogized man, stressed his essential worth and dignity, expressed deep faith in his tremendous creative potential, and proclaimed freedom of the individual and inalienable rights of the individual. It was centered on the man with all his earthly joys and sorrows, opposed to religious asceticism. It defended man's right to pleasure and the satisfaction of earthly desires and requirements. It meant the glorification of the human and the naturals, opposed to the divine and otherworldly, beginning of modern science. The growth of modern science was an offshoot of the emergence of humanism, which was characterized by the rejection of the authority of the church and divine in controlling the lives of the people. Rather, a new faith in the intellectual and physical capacities of man to control nature and change his life was developed. The Renaissance marked the beginning of modern science. Earlier, the intellectual life in medieval Europe was dominated by the church. Any view to be held true had to be supported by the authority of the scriptures of the church. Thus, the Renaissance scientists began learning by questioning and observation. The scientific method of experimentation is used by scientists even today. Empirical observation became the bedrock of science instead of mysticism, superstition, or spirituality. Reformation. This was another offshoot of the spirit of humanism, which changed the focus of importance from the church to man, his deeds, and his needs. The term Reformation refers to two major developments in the history of Europe that took place towards the later part of the Renaissance. The first was the Protestant Reformation, which resulted in a split in Christianity and the cessation of a large number of countries from the Roman Catholic Church and the establishment of separate churches in those countries. The second development concerned reforms within the Roman Catholic Church, generally referred to as Catholic Reformation or Counter Reformation. So, he rejected the entire system of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. Luther introduced German as the language of church services, abolished the special status of priest as representative of God on earth, and emphasized faith rather than pilgrimages. Luther occupied himself with the task of building an independent German church and in expounding his doctrine. The German rulers and common people of Germany supported Martin Luther. The rulers wanted to be free from the authority of popes and get possession of the wealth in German monasteries of themselves. The common people, on the other hand, liked Luther's teaching because it gave them an opportunity to demand more freedom from their rulers. Luther questioned many of the practices of the church and whether they aligned with the teachings of the Bible. As a result, a new form of Christianity known as Protestantism was created. The Protestant movement soon spread to various parts of Europe. In England, Henry VIII declared himself the head of the church. Henry VIII's reign was followed by a long conflict between Catholics and Romans. However, in 1559, Queen Elizabeth I established the Church of England as the official church. The Protestant Reformation did not lead to the establishment of universal Protestant church under a single authority like the Catholic Church was under the popes. By the 17th century, half of Europe had adopted one or other of the Protestant creeds. The Protestant Reformation was followed by a realization that there was a need for a moral regeneration of the Catholic Church and the papacy. Renaissance art, architecture, and science. Scientists like Copernicus proposed the heliocentric theory, in which he proposed that heavenly bodies do not revolve around the earth, instead they do around the sun. Later, his claim was supported by Galileo, who invented the telescope, and Kepler too contributed through his planet's elliptical orbit theory. Architects such as Filippo Brunelleschi employed mathematics to accurately engineer and design immense buildings with expansive domes for religious buildings. They used techniques such as perspective, shadows, and light to add depth to their work and infused expressions of emotions in their paintings, for instance, Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. Thus, art, architecture, and science closely interacted with each other during the Renaissance period. End of the Renaissance. Multiple factors were responsible for the demise of the Renaissance. First one, disruptions in Italy. Second one, counter-reformation. Disruptions in Italy. By the end of the 15th century, numerous wars had plagued the Italian peninsula. Spanish, French, German invaders battling for Italian territories caused disruption and instability in the region. Also, changing trade routes led to a period of economic decline and limited the amount of money that wealthy contributors could spend on the arts. Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Church, in retaliation to Luther's Protestantism, censored artists and writers which critiqued the papal authority. This generated a sense of fear which hastened the creativity and innovation among the Renaissance thinkers. In addition, the Council of Trent of 1545 issued key statements and clarification of the Church's doctrine and teachings, in which Protestantism and humanism were regarded as sin. Also, any views that challenged the Catholic Church was considered as an act of heresy punishable by death. Impact of the Renaissance spirit. There are two main impacts of the Renaissance spirit. One is discovery of new sea routes and rise of international trade. Second one is spirit of capitalism. Discovery of new sea route and rise of international trade. These new geographical discoveries opened up a whole new world for the explorers. These discoveries resulted in increased trade and hence increased wealth. This wealth was further utilized in the development of science and technology, which improved the capacities of their armies, which led to the colonization of newly captured territories and enslavement of the colonial subjects. These slaves were further utilized for the exploitation of the natural wealth of these colonies, bringing even more riches for the colonial powers. Spirit of capitalism. Renaissance products like Protestantism offered a concept of the worldly calling and gives worldly activity a religious character. As Calvinism developed, a deep psychological need for clues about whether one was actually saved arose, and Calvinists looked to their success in worldly activity for their clues. Thus, they came to value profit and material success as signs of God's favor, and the spirit of capitalism arose as a consequence of the Protestant ethics of showing gratitude to God by attaining material success. Capitalism is a system of production in which the means of production and distribution are owned by individuals or corporates and where competitors participate in a free market. The means of production are land, labor, and capital, factories, farms, mines, natural resources, and money. Individuals invested their capital or money hoping to make a profit. Much of the profit was reinvested. Producers competed with one another to make better quality products at lower prices. In theory, competition resulted in the best product at the lowest possible price. Age of Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason. It was the period characterized by rationality as reason superseded cultural and religious tradition and dogmas. World history was a primary authority used to settle philosophical, scientific, and political problems. Contributions to the human knowledge was made through means of observation, experimentation, and inference. The impact of Age of Reason was following. One is scientific approach, second thing philosophical approach, the third one emergence of the public sphere, the fourth one spread of democratic values. First one, scientific approach. Earlier, science was largely dominated by the deductive method, which began with generally accepted conclusions that were culturally and theologically accepted as true and then applied to particular observable cases. Post-Renaissance, this deductive method gave way to the inductive method, which was based on observations leading to newer and newer conclusions. Philosophical approach. Descartes' critique of all previous philosophies as uncertain paved the way for a fresh approach which mandated that reliance on facts is absolutely certain, particularly the fact that he was thinking and thus he himself existed. The emergence of the public sphere. The Enlightenment was marked with emergence of a space in which individuals are able to come together as a public. This public included coffee houses, reading societies, etc. With the growth of the international book trade and the emergence of mass-produced pamphlets and news bulletins, it was possible for the people from different parts of the world to read diverse literature and discuss the events, persons, and ideas at global level. Books on science and natural philosophy were increasingly read for intellectual stimulation. The spread of democratic values. In the 17th century, various attempts were made by monarchs to establish the principle of the divine right of kingship. But by the 18th century, their failure was evident. The monarchs, which were bankrupt, had to turn to assemblies and parliaments to raise money to finance their projects. This resulted in participation of different groups in decision making, which in turn put limits on the power of the monarchs. So, important personalities. The first one is Galileo Galilei, his period 1564 to 1642. The second person, René Descartes, his period starts from 1596 to 1650. Third one is Benedict Baruch Spinoza, his year starting from 1632 to 1677. Fourth one, John Locke, his period starting from 1632 to 1704. Fifth one, Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, his period start from 1712 to 1778. And then the next person, Voltaire, his period starts from 1694 to 1778. Immanuel Kant, his period starts from 1724 to 1804. And then Montesquieu, his period starts from 1689 to 1755. First one, Galileo Galilei. He was Galileo Galilei. He was an Italian astronomer and mathematician. He is accredited for the discovery of the moons of Jupiter. He was a proponent of the heliocentric theory. He faced intense opposition and persecution for his views, especially from the religious authorities. The conflict between fundamentalist and religious beliefs and scientific progress was clearly manifested in his lifetime. The second person is René Descartes. He was a French philosopher, widely regarded as the father of modern philosophy. He made a new beginning by discarding the traditional scholastic methodology and beginning with the one fact that he could be certain of the fact that he was thinking. Third person is Benedict. He was a Dutch Jewish, later Christian rationalist and philosopher. Like Descartes, he used geometric method in his philosophy. Further, he called for a government that would be broad-minded and liberal. However, his views were not easily accepted in 17th century Europe. John Locke, 1632 to 1704, in his essay concerning human understanding, laid the philosophy of sense experience as a means of attaining truth in contrast to Descartes' method. Next person, Francis Bacon. He was an English philosopher, statesman, orator, and scientist. He is considered as the father of empiricism for his work and advocacy of scientific method and methodological scientific inquiry in investigating scientific phenomena. He encouraged an empirical approach both through his own example and philosophically. Next person, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his most important work, The Social Contract, he emphasized that human beings are naturally in competition with one another, and hence they join together to form groups so that they stand a better chance in the struggle. Thus, this social contract was at the base of modern civilization and society. The next person is Voltaire. He was a famous French thinker who believed in God but not in any particular religion. He strongly advocated the three principles of free trade, religious tolerance, and freedom of expression for progress and prosperity. He too had considerable influence on French Revolution. Next person is Immanuel Kant. He was a German philosopher who claimed that we can never know objects in themselves, but only as they appear to us. He laid that knowledge is not determined by the nature of the external world of objects, but rather by the nature of human rationality. This approach led to the foundation of idealism in German philosophy. He is considered as the most influential philosopher of enlightenment. Next person is Montesquieu. He was a pioneering French political thinker and advocate of human freedom. In his work, The Spirit of the Laws, he studied different systems of government, such as the republic, the monarchy, and the despotic state, and offered critical analysis. His views greatly influenced the constitution of many countries, including India. Thank you.